The verdict as read reflect the will of the jury and will be filed accordingly. I have to thank you on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota for not only jury service, but heavy-duty jury service. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to follow the deputy back into your usual room, and I will join you in a few minutes to answer questions and to advise you further. So, all rise for the jury. All right, be seated. With the guilty verdicts returned, we're going to have Blakely, you may file a written argument as to Blakely factors within 1 week. The court will issue findings on the Blakely factors, the factual findings, 1 week after that. We'll order a PSI immediately returnable in 4 weeks. And we will also have a briefing on, after you get the PSI, 6 weeks from now, and then 8 weeks from now, we will have sentencing. We'll get you the exact dates in a scheduling order. Is there a motion on behalf of the state?
The state would move to have the court revoke the defendant's bail and remand him into custody pending sentencing.
Bail is revoked, bond is discharged, and the defendant is remanded to the custody of the Yapping County Sheriff. Anything further?
Aye.
Thank you.
So there you have it. The jury in Yapping County in Minneapolis finding Derek Chauvin guilty on all 3 counts: second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Guilty in all 3. You can see him being led away there in the courtroom. He had been out on bail. You heard the state request of the judge that bail be revoked and that he be taken into custody, which is exactly what the judge decided to do. You can see the counts up on your screen right now. The jury deliberating yesterday afternoon and then began deliberating again early this morning, but it was a short period of time before we learned that they had come to a unanimous conclusion. Clearly, they thought that the case made by the prosecution and perhaps that final closing argument, that rebuttal from Jerry Blackwell when he said to the jury, it's as simple as what that 9-year-old girl, one of the bystanders, said that she heard the paramedics say when they arrived there more than 9 minutes after that knee was put to George Floyd's neck. She said that she heard paramedics say, get off of him. Of course, in the hours and the days to come, we will learn more from that jury, what they were thinking over the course of this 3-week trial. But we wanted to look at the reaction coming in from Minneapolis. This was the scene in South Minneapolis just moments ago. They had described the gathering, obviously erupting.
Oh, they've named the place George Floyd Square.
Embracing one another, and in many ways for that community and for the people who have gathered there, it has been extraordinarily long year in this country. This was the scene again, George Floyd Square. Reaction from the family, George Floyd's family, with their legal team, Ben Crump, we know, leading that team, clearly overjoyed. They believe justice has been served in this case. Derek Chauvin found guilty on all counts, and I want to bring in our chief legal analyst as we look at these images. Clearly, the pause there is in between each count as the judge was reading from that piece of paper delivered to him by the foreperson of the jury. And in Dan, guilty on all counts. They believe the prosecution made its case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yep, on each and every charge. And remember that there are slightly different theories with regard to second-degree murder and third-degree murder. I mean, there was a possibility that he could be found guilty of second-degree murder, not of third-degree murder, and then guilty of second-degree manslaughter. That didn't happen. This was a prosecution clean sweep here, and now that shows that he will be sentenced on the highest charge, which is second-degree murder. Up to 40 years. The sentencing guidelines in Michigan suggest more likely 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, they revoked the bill.
You mentioned that 9-year-old girl, and she could be relevant in the context of sentencing because prosecutors can ask for what's called an enhancement in the sentencing, meaning beyond what the guidelines would suggest because a child was present. And so that 9-year-old girl was not just an emotional witness, but she could become a very important witness with regard to the potential sentence that Derek Chauvin gets. You heard him, the judge then referring to the Blakely standard, and that means basically start preparing for the argument over sentencing. And that will be the next phase of this case to determine what the sentence for Derek Chauvin will be. But at this point, certainly a big win for the prosecution in this case, getting everything that they asked this jury for.
Just to drill down that point, Dan, as per Minnesota state law, the jury will decide, or the judge will decide sentencing on the highest of the charges, which of course is unintentional second-degree murder. The presumed sentence is usually 10 to 15 years, but he faces up to 40 years, and as you mentioned, the state will ask for what's called an aggravated sentence here, and he could face decades behind bars.
Absolutely. And, I think that is going to be, really the next big debate in this case over exactly what should be the sentence for Derek Chauvin. Again, as we talked about when the jury reached its verdict and we said they came back so quickly, this is not good news for Derek Chauvin. Again, on the sentencing side, I wouldn't want to be Derek Chauvin either, meaning that, typically, and it's not just typically, it's really the vast majority of cases where you're talking about second-degree murder or third-degree murder. You are talking about up to 15 years. But in this case, based on a number of factors, I expect the prosecution to ask for more time, and the judge will have to determine that. And David, I want to just add one other quick point, which is about the diversity of this jury. And I think it's important because we often talk about diversity, and it sounds like a concept, as opposed to something that can actually instill a sense of confidence in people about a verdict. The fact that there were 4 people who were African American on that jury. There were 2 who described themselves as multiracial, 6 white, and they all came together and very quickly agreed on this verdict. This was a jury of peers, and as a result, I think that's helpful in instilling confidence in the verdict for the community at large.
And Sonny Hostin, as we look at these images coming in from across the country, but first, of course, from Minneapolis, relief in that community, and you yourself said as a former prosecutor yourself, when you heard that there was a verdict and this quickly, that even you had thought there would be at least questions from perhaps the jurors for the judge, and there was not. Unanimous, guilty on all charges.
David, I've been a lawyer for 27 years, and I remember when I was in law school during my first year, the Rodney King verdict came out, and it was an acquittal for 4 officers who, on video, beat and stomped and tased beat a man 56 times with a baton. And I believed my eyes then. So I believed my eyes this time with George Floyd. And even though I knew that fast verdicts always hint at an agreement, even though all of my training told me that they likely be convicted on at least the highest count or at least the lowest count, because of the history in this country, because it is so rare that police officers are convicted, because black men and black boys are killed by police with impunity in this country, and that is just the truth, at a rate 5 times more than their white counterparts. Because I am the mother of an 18-year-old boy who is now in South Africa, and I feel that he is safer in South Africa than he is in his own country. I am so relieved that this is what justice finally looks like for my community. And while I know that this does not bring George Floyd back to his family, to his loved ones, to his brother, who we've heard from so eloquently at least I believe now that the movement that we've seen since his murder on video for the world to see.
Why did they put a question mark at the end of justice served?
I really believe that this is a movement that we've seen.
They put a question mark.
And for that,
I don't know why.
I am so very thankful that perhaps we will see real change, much needed change in this country.
They should have arrested those policemen who were also standing there.
Who was standing there?
They should have given them one.
The jury
And they are from back there.
when a couple of Sunny said and her observations along with what Ben Abrams said just moments before her, that perhaps this could be a unifying moment when you think about the jury and the diversity, the makeup of that jury. 6 white jurors, 6 people of color, 4 black jurors, and 2 that self-identify as multiracial, but they all deliberated together, and in just a short period of time were united on what they saw when they watched those 9 minutes and what they heard over the course of 3 weeks inside that Minneapolis courtroom. You can see they have begun to put up signs in Minneapolis. That's the scene from South Minneapolis. Justice served is what that sign says underneath George Floyd's name now. They've now put that up on the sign. Lindsay Davis is in Minneapolis. And Lindsay, the reaction there.
David, you know, there was a novel by Terry McMillan, subsequently a movie called Waiting to Exhale. Today was so much more than that. That was All of Us. And just a little while ago, I was telling you about how the streets here were empty. You hardly saw any people or cars. Well, suddenly now you hear just this celebratory honking. I saw a small group of black people walk by who chanted Black Lives Matter. And certainly, you know, this verdict doesn't change our criminal justice system, but perhaps for some, at least for this day, if nothing more beyond that, it does send this message. And for those who consider this to be a win or a victory, perhaps they owe a debt to Darnell Frazier, the 17-year-old who shot that video, because so much was made of the prosecution saying, but for the knee, right? And I imagine many today are saying, but for the videotape, would we find ourselves in this place today? After all, if we go back to how this started, all with a counterfeit $20 bill.
With a counterfeit $20 bill, ridiculous, that resulted in the death of somebody. That caused the police officer to put their knee on his neck for 9 minutes, over 9 minutes.
Around in Minneapolis for us as we continue our live coverage of the verdict. Police officer Derek Chauvin. He was a veteran with the police force there in Minneapolis, a 19-year veteran, 45 years old. He's been found guilty of second-degree unintentional murder, guilty of third-degree murder, guilty of second-degree manslaughter. And we're getting some color from inside that courtroom. Of course, the live stream offers the country and the world a perspective that we would not have seen had we not been in this pandemic. The judge saying he was doing this live stream because the community would not be allowed to come into the courtroom and witness this trial as it unfolded. But some of what we can see in that courtroom has just come in, and this is from
because they show that
inside the courtroom. They're allowing a reporter to shoot inside that courtroom every day because of restrictions, just a small number of reporters. They described the scene as the judge said, all rise. The jurors entering that courtroom, we are told all of them looked serious. None of them looked emotional, or that they had been teary, or that there had been, emotions exchanged.